Liz, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Can I get a motion to acknowledge the certificate of posting, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Okay, it is 9:03. We're going to open the budget hearing. I'm going to turn it over to the CAO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Board of Supervisors, good morning. I want to thank the public as well as staff for being here today in attendance. It's been 6 months and a lot of work. So I want to thank everybody for being here and the culmination of all the work from the department heads. Really appreciate that. Wanted to highlight a few things within what we're going to do today, just so everyone's aware. We do have some new board members. With this, the process is a little bit different, but similar to a regular board meeting. Today, we will be hearing a recommended budget from administration to your board, and we'll be requesting for your board to move forward with the recommendation. Obviously, you can discuss any matter that you so choose. We did do our best to put the items that were in question or had some significant changes or some tweaks on a regular agenda. We did our best to analyze that. Most of the items on the consent have been discussed, but there still may be a question that may have come up since the publication of this, and your board has any questions with that, you're more than welcome to pull it, and we can discuss it further. The consent item will be handled just like a regular consent item, so we will request your board to open up public comment and then move forward through the consent as we do a normal board meeting. We have Ramon Aban here. He's our budget officer. He will be presenting to your board. We have a PowerPoint to make it a little bit more easier to go through the process. We'll be highlighting some key elements to budget and the Budget Act. So we have some items in the PowerPoint that we've actually highlighted, statutory codes, government codes that we must follow. One of those codes is having our auditor controller here, Joe Paul Gonzalez. That is a requirement, along with some other things. So we appreciate the auditor's office being in attendance, the assistant auditor as well. And so with that, I did want to highlight a couple more things. We're projecting probably a couple hours, shouldn't be any more than midday, and then we will be done with this. Again, like I said, we've gone through most of this. With regards to the FTE count, just wanted to highlight, I'm not going to go through my CIO letter, just there's some key elements. I recommend you reading it if you haven't had time to read it. Overall, there was a request to move forward with 16 general fund positions and approximately 10 from the subvention department. There's really going to be a net difference of about 14.5 positions, which we'll highlight. So I think that's really key with that, and why we're moving forward with the request to move forward with all the positions that we had presented before. There's going to be only 4 out of the general fund from a net. So that's where we're moving or reducing the positions, from those unfunding those positions or removing them, or having a position that we will be creating at a higher level. So that's the difference there. And there'll be 4.5 at a behavioral health net difference, and 6 positions at a health and human services, adding up to 14.4, which you saw on that one slide. I wanted to provide a little bit more clarity and background with that. With that, also, this year's budget has a tremendous amount of CIP projects that your board has moved forward with, which includes roads. And I know that your board has, actually, even prior boards have really put an emphasis on addressing our roads and utilizing all means to get the roads done. So we have in there utilizing SB1 funds, Measure G funds, general fund. There's a significant amount of money in general fund that we'll be infusing into a benefit package from San Juan Oaks, and other impact fees and so forth. So there's a tremendous amount of funding that we have moving a lot of projects through. It'll be a multi-year process, but just wanted to highlight that for your board. Along with, we have in this budget also is the library expansion, which is very significant to our community, but also a good amount of money coming out of our budget as well. We will be leveraging ARPA funding as well as library impact fees to offset our cost, along with utilizing grants. And I did want to say that the board, I want to thank the board, prior boards as well, moving forward with getting a grant writer. We have done a really good job this last year in receiving grants, but with that, there's also a lot of work to move forward with the projects associated with the grants that we received. So with that, that's the reason why we really need to strategize on some of these positions and making sure we have positions to be able to do the work, and that's really key. So with that, it's more or less all I have to say. There's a lot we'll be talking about more throughout this process, but I just wanted to give a kind of a brief highlight of the budget and thank your board for all the meetings, special meetings we've had to discuss some of these things at a more granular level. Today is more just going through the process, but there still could be some questions, there could be some comments, there could be some concerns, which we're more than willing to discuss those with your board. I have to say one thing, though. I have to say I want a special thanks to a few people. Gracie Rodriguez, our analyst in administration, and Cheyenne Torres. Amazing job. They have worked really hard, and I just need to make sure that they were recognized today. They did a great job, as well as Ramon Abon. He's our budget officer, and he trial by fire. He's he has, with the fire hose, he has moved. He's learned a lot, and he's done a lot, and I have to thank him as well. He really has stepped up, and I don't think he's had a regular lunch in a while, maybe a month probably. I don't know, but he's worked really hard, so I wanted to recognize that. Along with our auditors, Leanne Godness and Joe Paul Gonzalez, we've had regular meetings with them through this process, and they've helped assist and guide Ramon, our office, and just working together collaboratively. So I want to thank them as well, along with all the department heads and all of their key financial folks that have started this process 6 months ago and have worked with administration throughout this process. So it's been a lot of hard work, along with all the other things that we're doing, everything, potholes, emergencies, so many other things that we've been doing our regular jobs. We've also had to work on this budget. So I want to thank everybody for all the hard work. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move this over to Ramon.
May I ask a question really quick
Sure.
for clarification? You mentioned the positions that you were going to put forward, the 16. And so I thought there was some sort of discrepancy at the last meeting that we had where at least 2 of us disagreed as to the position. So I'm talking about the 10 plus the 4 road positions that were going to be funded under the general fund, but then some of them are going to be cost spread in the cost plan. And so are those the ones that you're referring to that have going to all be funded?
Yeah.
Okay. Now.
And we can talk about that on the schedule section.
Okay.
Because there's a schedule portion of it that we can talk to it, or specifically that's why we add the road crew item on regular agenda to have that item on there. Again, if there's any concerns with any of the positions, we can pull those items also if we need to. But again, it's it's part of the schedule element of this.
So it's not on the consent then? It's,
You're gonna move forward with at the very
I
end.
see that as schedule authorized
Yeah.
positions under the budget hearing?
That's right,
Okay, all right, thank you.
yeah. Ramon?
Good morning, board members and members of the public. Thank you, Ray, for that opening. I appreciate the comments, and I echo everything Ray said as far as staff, department staff, fiscal staff, and the administrative staff. Everybody it was all hands on deck to get the budget prepared. So thank you, Ray, and everyone else. So we're having these budget hearings because it's part of our government code, and we're going to go ahead and discuss a lot of items. Let's see. Essentially, what we're going to be asking the board is to move forward with the recommended budget. We're going to request a temporary due pass, and we need to have this recommended budget move forward before June 30th. So we're going to start today, and hopefully we'll get through everything before the 30th. I know if for some reason we need to extend the conversation, we will. It's possible. I don't want to repeat some of these things that Ray's already covered.
Let me just highlight, if you don't mind going back
Yeah.
there. So again, your board will be moving forward with the recommended budget, and at the end, there, under staff recommendations, there's moving forward with the approval of a resolution, which you have in your packet. It's at the end of the meeting. However, Government Code 29088, I just wanted to highlight that we will be coming back to your board. There is a requirement by the statute for you to move forward with final adoption of the actual budget. And we plan to bring that back in August is our plan. There's also some corrections with prior years on the GAN limit that we will be coming back maybe in July. So just wanted to, for prior years. It may have an impact on the GAN limit today, but we're just going to move forward with what we have today on the GAN limit and make some modifications and corrections in July, and then come back to your board for final adoption. Now, again, in the recommendation, there's an element that allows the auditor and the CAO to move forward with some small changes, and your board will then adopt it in, like I said, in August. So I just wanted to be clear with that. That's part of the statute within your within the supervisors So go ahead, Ramon, you can move on.
So what is being approved today? Today we're going to show you the recommended budget as spending authority. We will continue conversations we've already been having about since around April, and we'll discuss the positions. Flexibility, staff, fixed assets, capital projects, and then operating budgets for all departments, CSAs, CFDs, and we'll have an example of the Schedule 9 and 15. So in the county budget, this is an example of the Schedule 9, which is for governmental funds. Today, we're not going to be showing all the schedules. What we are going to be working with is the version that we use, which is available online. It's all the links that we have for every budget unit. And so that's our Schedule 9, so to speak. It doesn't look exactly like this, but this is what we will be completing once the auditor's office closes the books. Then we'll be able to have all the final numbers for these Schedule 9s that have to be submitted to the state by December 1st. So this is the online version of the Schedule 9, And this specific one is for internal services, so it shows revenues and expenses, and we have the first two columns are actual transactions. So this shows us how a specific budget unit ended the year. For example, the first column after the description of revenues and expenses is it shows us the fiscal year 2021 actuals. And then the next column is 21-22 actuals. So you can see we ended the year. So I'm going to go through this as if it's the first time that you're hearing it. I'm sure some of you probably already know how this works, how the revenues, expenses, and then at the bottom we have revenues less expenses. So if we look at the first fiscal year 2021 actuals, I'm going to look at the first row, revenues. That shows that the internal services division brought in $573,000 worth of revenues. In this case, a majority of those revenues were based on interdepartmental charges, which we have come to recognize as the cost plan. So for this specific budget unit, a majority of the revenues is through the cost plan. And then the expenses row shows you overall $685,000 worth of expenses for this unit. Now that breakdown is made, that the total expenses is made of salaries and benefits, $575,000, and then services and supplies, $110,000. So that first column are actual transactions. That's how we ended the year, fiscal 2021. And so the revenues less expenses shows a negative number there. And so what I've been doing as I met with departments earlier this year is I would let them know, in case they didn't see it the way I see it, when we have a negative number there at the bottom, it's basically telling us, especially for general fund departments, this is showing us that the net cost of this specific budget unit was $111,000. So when it's a negative, what happens is we dip into fund balance. So that was the case for this division in 21, and not so much in fiscal year 21-22. It was a lot less. We see that negative 14,000 at the bottom. And then the recommended in 22-23 was what you see in that CAO rec. And the far right-hand side, we have the department requested column, and then we have the CAO recommended. It did change a little bit, and part of it was, a large part was the salaries and benefits, and we're going to get into that discussion later. It's an increase in a position. I believe the contract management position is one of them that we're going to have out of this department. And so I just wanted to kind of share that with you. It's the same for every budget unit. That's pretty much how we can read the financials as far as the budget goes. So countywide budget overview, the fiscal year 23-24 recommended budget does have about $302 million. That's our total budget, and it represents an increase of about $67.8 million from the prior adopted budget. The increases are in capital fund expenditures, road improvement projects, and additional staffing changes in the road department, as well as other key areas related to general expenditure increases. I'm going to skip that piece on staffing levels because CAO has already discussed that. Now on this slide, the only thing I'm going to mention is that even though it may appear as the county has a total increase of 26.5 full-time equivalent positions, the truth of the matter is that our net increase is that 14.5, and the reason the net increase is not 26.5 is because a lot of the departments, they either deleted positions or they converted positions. So because some of the position requests are converting an existing position, it kind of offset with a lot of the general fund departments essentially deleting positions, meaning for whatever reason, the department decided, you know what, we're not gonna need, as an example, the one that comes up is for RMA. I believe they had 2 CSA coordinators approved, and they decided all they need really at this point is 1 CSA coordinator. So when they delete 1 position, even though there's more requests countywide, it has this, it kind of offsets. So here's the general fund and road fund position requests. Can we just move forward? It's already
Yeah,
been-
we'll move forward, and then when we get to that section, we can come back to this page if there is a question with FTEs.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is the subvented funds position requests. And this is a summary of countywide budget overview. This is where we see the expenses for all funds. That's that far right-hand column, 2023-24 CAO recommended. We have in revenues 241 million, and in expenses the 302 million. And the reason for that jump, I discussed it earlier. It's really the capital facilities, roads, bridges. This one shows a graph, expenditures by category. We can see that our fixed assets is 30% of the pie. And again, a large part of that is composed of roads and bridges. These are very expensive projects, so that kind of takes up most of the expenditures. That's followed by services and supplies and salaries and benefits. So for the general fund, the budget totals about almost 105 million, and that was a $23 million increase from the prior adopted budget. Some of the changes from the previous fiscal year included the road CIP projects. We still have ARPA projects to be completed, and there is additional contingencies for emergencies. I believe a year ago it was $1 million in contingencies, and this year it was decided to add another $1 million there, just in case. That way we can be prepared. I know this year we were hit with storms kind of back to back, and fortunately we did have things in place to kind of help with those things. So that additional one is just in case. So one thing that I wanted to point out is the county will need to continue the vacancy budgeting practice because this is going to allow departments the flexibility to recruit during these difficult times. And we also, the budget office will be enacting policies to closely monitor vacancy budgeting quarterly. So we're anticipating that the first quarterly review for vacancies will be around October. This will give everybody time to kind of like get all the finances in for the first 3 months of the fiscal year, and then we can come back and review how we're doing at that point. Here we have the general fund expenditures by department. And it looks like Public Works is the department with the most expenditures, and the reason for that is because, again, it includes the road fund. Next, the other big piece of the puzzle is HHSA, their subvented funds. Then the CAO has about 44 million in expenditures. And now the CAO's office, it's a big part of the puzzle because it does include multiple budget units within that department. And one of the budget units on this list at the bottom, you see non-department and contributions. It's cut out, but it also includes contributions from the general fund. And this includes essentially countywide projects that if for some reason road fund or a subvented fund is unable to cover some of these costs, then the general fund makes contributions to different departments. It's as needed, basically. One of the main ones is, I believe, the the road fund. We have. I'm sorry, general fund contribution budget unit includes about $17 million there, and part of it is for the CIP projects and then the road projects. So here we have a link. I don't know if we should click on that or just kind of keep going through the slides.
It might be good just to educate the public and possibly the board as well. So go ahead and click on the link.
So when you click on the link, it takes us to the recommended budget. It's the table of contents. And here the public can read the letter from the CAO. They can read the community profile, directory of public officials, the strategic plan. It has some instructions on how to read the budget. Everything's online. We have our budget policies, and then a summary, general tax revenue forecast, expenditures overview, revenue overview, and then down here under budget details, we can actually go into a specific department or budget unit, and we can see the details for that budget unit.
And just to clarify and to maybe emphasize, that is actually your Schedule 9s. So, and I believe the other one, the CSAs are the 15, if I recall.
CSAs are Schedule 15,
15.
and they should be
Right down below there.
around this
There
area.
you go,
Here they
CSA,
are.
Community Service Area. So that's Schedule 15, and all of the remaining ones are Schedule 9. Thanks, Ramon. And also too, in the actual budget on our agenda, there's 2 sections. We added a transparency portal. So some of you may have been working on that and still may look at it and work on it. That was published on the 11th is when we uploaded it of June. And then we also, if you can see it here on the screen here, go ahead and go to the budget section. So in this folder, you have 2. You have the transparency portal, and then you have the story section, which we just went to. And just to highlight for some that may not know, we were one of the first counties to have an online budget online process. So it's still a work in progress. We're still working through some of the things that we need to work through. There's some transferring from our ERP system into the system and automating a few functions, which actually Ramon has already done some work on that, which is great, as well as when wrapping up the budget, when the Schedule 9s are done, we want to make it a lot more user-friendly on building the remaining schedules. So those are the things that we hope to work on during the next 6 months to make it even more streamlined and efficient. So.
I'm going to go ahead and continue with the slides. Here we go. So as Ray mentioned earlier, we have a lot of items on consent, and these are the budget units with normal cost increases. These include COLA, service contracts, renewals, a lot of normal operating things. And on regular, we have selected a few items with significant changes or that perhaps board members had been discussing previously.
And just want to add one thing before you go to the next slide on consent. Typically, over the years, we've had the subvention funds on consent because they're not really an impact to the general fund. However, there might be some things that maybe want to be discussed in it, but I think we've already covered a lot of that already.
So here we have additional budget information. regarding reorganization and adding positions. For administration, we had one of our requests was an accounting technician, and the other was a risk specialist. We've been looking at technology to address efficiencies and workload. We also have that contract management position to help with oversight of countywide contracts. We've been analyzing healthcare, analyzing retention and recruitment, and I don't know if there's anything else that you'd like to add.
No. It's fine.
With that, I will hand it back to the board chair for consent agenda items.
Thank you, Ramon. and Thank you to everybody, all of the staff put in all this work. I reviewed everything, and it was very telling this weekend, so thank you so much. And it was so easy to find all the information, so thank you. So with that, moving into consent agenda, do we have any public comment for consent agenda?
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please provide a speaker card, and on Zoom, please press *9 or the raised hand icon. I have no public comment.
Okay, bringing it back to the board, does any of the board members have any items that they would like to pull?
I thought we were gonna go over what the presentation was before we go to consent. Are we not?
I think that'll be part of the regular agenda, I'm guessing,
Okay.
right? Like for positions, is that what you're speaking
Yeah.
to?
Yes.
Positions is right now, though, right? 'Cause
Yes.
We could talk about it
'cause
now. if-
Regular doesn't have, sorry for interrupting,
Thank
Madam
you,
Chair.
because I have some concerns as
I j-
well.
It's a little confusing, because I don't see, like.
So why don't we do
specifically
this? Why don't we go ahead and, if it may, let's discuss before we actually get the vote on consent. Let's go back to the slide and look at the FTE schedule, if you don't
Okay.
mind, since
No,
we
I
already.
don't mind. Okay, so we're
Thank you.
going to
So-
go back to,
Ramon, can you go back to that one slide on the two position, the set of positions
the
there?
E1 schedule of
Mhm.
authorized
Yeah.
positions?
Yes,
So these are the positions, I think, Supervisor Gonzalez, you were
yes.
questioning.
Well, turn the screen so the supervisor can see it. Okay. Well, as I said at the last meeting, I was pleased that you were looking creatively at funding the positions, and I know that there was a discrepancy, at least between two of us, regarding the vacancy method. And so I don't want to speak for Supervisor Kozmicki, but I remember praising you, Ramon, for looking at outside the box to get all these positions funded. And so if that's the will of the board, then great, but I don't think that's 100% of us. And so I don't want to speak for Supervisor Kozmicki. I'll let you go first, Colin, if you want, and then I'll chime in where my issues are.
Thank you, Supervisor Gonzalez. And just for clarity, the auditing committee just met and talked about vacancy budgeting, and I think you'll be pleased that I think we're close to agreement on that, and but there is an additional mechanism that will be discussed at some point, just to tighten up the controls on, throughout the year, each budget cycle. So it's not that I'm against necessarily, it's just making sure that we have those controls in place.
Okay. So that would be the quarterly audit that they had mentioned?
Yeah, and it's actually and we actually put it in in the budget policy for this year. Let's see here. Go to the end here. Give me 1 second. It's under staff recommendations item. It's under, what's the actual resolution number? There's a resolution, it's item number 6 or 7 within that resolution. It's the resolution. It's gonna be at the very end, and what we'll do is we'll go and I'll highlight that after. So there's an actual resolution that we'll highlight at the very end, and it's within the staff recommendation. But we will come back to your board as as Ramon had mentioned, quarterly, so it'd be 1 month following, so we wanted to put that down on writing to make sure that we come back to your board, review our finances, revenues and expenditures, along with FTEs, status of where we stand with vacancies, and also to what those savings equate to. And so our goal is to make sure that we fund that $5 million, approximately $5 million of vacancies, which we're going to be utilizing to basically balance the budget. And typically, I think right now this year, we're about $9 million for the full year, about 5, 9, 10 million, somewhere around there. So we'll have plenty probably by mid-year. Probably in 2 quarters, we should make up that difference. But we can track it and look at it. Again, the discussion with the audit committee was, if something comes up, there is a blurb, something we're going to have to really start looking at potentially freezing any more hiring to cover those costs. So we have to really keep a close eye on it. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm good other than that. Thank you.
Madam Chair? Yeah, thank you. Just to reiterate some points I made last time around, just to put myself on the record here. So I support the 4 road workers. I do support the grant-funded or partially grant-funded positions, but outside of that, I just at this point can't support any other positions, and I'll get to the reasons why real briefly here. I just think it's going to be increasingly, for one, it's going to be increasingly challenging to recruit and retain employees as we move on here. So what we're being presented today, I think, is going to evolve even over this current budget year. So this is going to be a unique budget cycle because we're also going into union negotiations, and so that's going to have a significant impact potentially on the budget as well. That's one of the primary reasons I would like to hold off on this level of spending. And then the other one, as I said in prior budget hearings, I just feel really strongly that I think we're at the point where we all talk about having roads as the priority, and I'm fully aware that we're putting a lot of money toward the roads in the next several years, and I was part of that process, and I think it's fantastic. I'm just very concerned that we don't have a structured way to accumulate revenue for future road improvements. So let's say 5 years down the road, when all of the Measure G money is going to be going toward the Highway 25 expansion, I think that's something that is not talked about enough. We have $3 to $4 million in Measure G funding annually that goes toward the roads, and that's just to meet the status quo without what we're setting aside in available discretionary dollars. So I feel like we should be somewhere close to that, at least getting close to that at some point, whether it's $1 million or $2 million, $3 million setting aside. I just feel like we have to do that in order. Otherwise, we're just basically, for me, again, even though we're putting a lot of money toward the roads, 5 years down the road or so, I'm just very concerned that we're not going to have funds again, and we're going to be kicking the can down the road further, no pun intended. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? I do see at the end of regular agenda, it does say final budget deliberations, and it's got kind of the schedule of authorized positions and all of that. So we will be returning to this section just in case. So I think at this point, unless either of you have anything, I think we are going to be returning. It's at the end. So I think we should go to consent agenda, and there was no public comment. Do we need to check and see if no? Okay.
I have one comment, just
Okay,
one.
yes.
It's in the story, and just so, because we have a newly elected official right now, the auditor controller is separate from the clerk recorder elections, and they're shown together in the story. Just a minor correction that'll need to be done in the story.
And we can make that change. Those are minor changes. We can make those. It's more in the actual story element, we can make those changes, yeah.
Yeah, it's separated in the budget units.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, thank you.
Okay, so would someone like to, let's say I gotta get this wording correct, make a motion for a temporary due pass for, on all consent agenda budget hearing items?
I'll make a motion to approve temporary due pass on consent items for this budget hearing.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed?
No.
So 4-1, Supervisor Kozmicki is opposed. Okay, moving on to the regular agenda. We'll start with the CAO's office.
Ramon?
Thank you. The first item we have is community programs, Division Budget Unit 1100. And we included this budget unit because it had been the topic of conversation from our previous special board meetings. And so we just wanted to include what it looks like online. This is the recommended budget. We have about 118,000 on your far right-hand corner, total expenses. And that $118,000 includes the 87,000 for fiscal year 23-24 anticipated status quo of providing support to the community programs you see on the list here. It's all senior groups, advocacy, Jóvenes Antano, and Senior Citizens Legal Services, Senior Council of Santa Cruz and San Benito. And then just for clarification, so 87,000 is the anticipated cost to continue to fund these programs. And you may be wondering why we show 118,000 as the total expenses, and a large part is because of the cost plan. So if we went online for other charges, we would see the additional costs. The difference between the cost plan from a year ago to what's expected for fiscal year 23-24. And so we wanted to bring it up to your attention as far as community programs in case you wanted to make some changes now.
And just keep in mind that this particular item was approved by prior boards for adult assistance, senior assistance, and again, there was a 3% escalator. So the 23-24 budget you see here includes the 3% from this last year. So that's it. So that's what we have before your board, and we'll pass it back to you, Madam Chair.
Do we have any public comment on this item?
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please provide a speaker card, and on Zoom, please press *9. And I believe Aaron Johnston, did you want to speak now?
Aaron, I think you're going to be for there's one more a little bit after. Yeah. Yeah, there's another one. Yeah, it's under the RMA 161, Economic Development.
Then no further public comment.
Thank you. Bringing it back to the board. Does the board have any comments or questions on this item? I'm confused, and I apologize. I'm sure it's because I'm brand new, but so I guess I look at it, and I guess I was under the assumption that we are writing checks to these organizations for support. Why is there a cost plan figured into to that? You know, because it's, what, I don't know, 20, 30, it's almost $30,000 more for a cost plan. So I apologize. Please help me understand this.
So the cost plan, let's see if I get it right, and we do have the auditor in the audience, so maybe you can speak to the way it works. But community programs, let's see if I can.
So there's an element of the general services that needs to occur, and what that element is drafting contracts, cutting checks. Those things don't happen by chance. There is some overhead to getting this financial assistance to them, and the cost plan is what we utilize to cover those costs. However, we don't bill them. So it's again, it's just for us to recognize what those costs are. That's ultimately why this is in here. Years ago, we didn't actually have it in there, but we wanted to share with the board what value there is to employees doing the work. And that's really what that is. It's just to understand that there is a cost associated with running this fund or this program outside of just them receiving funding. So, again, it's taking money out of one pocket and putting it in another, and the auditor controller's area, you can define it even further.
Good morning, Chair and Board of Supervisors. So, cost plan is a result of the Office of Management and Budget at the federal level. They provide guidelines for how cost recovery can occur with federal programs. And so, cost plan is based upon those guidelines. And if in order to accurately compute what is the fair share cost to be borne on these federal programs, cost plan has to be shared amongst all the transactions that occur in the county. So if we did not include this, community programs in the cost plan, it would in essence be an overstatement of costs on the federal programs. And that's why when we get audited every year within a single audit, they're looking at this. The external auditors are looking at these costs to make sure that they're not being overcharged. And they're very diligent about that. So that's why it is, that's why they're there. But the CAO is correct. We don't actually charge those costs out because it's like moving from the right pocket to the left. There's really no transaction. But the true cost has to be shown. And that's what this is about.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So is it typically always kind of a standard amount, or does it depend on, so like this is almost 30%. So is that typical? Is it usually that high? Say if we're talking any of the departments, I understand it when we're dealing kind of with our internal departments and things. Is it because, when you look at Hovenius and some of the senior council, is it because they're part of like they receive federal funding? Is that? No.
It has to do what the total general costs for general services in the general fund. That's like the CAO's office, HR, the auditor's office, buildings and maintenance. Those are, IT.
Yeah.
Those are all general services departments that the cost plan, all the costs that are created in those departments, the cost plan looks at and through a very,
The black box is what I call it.
black box program, it allocates the cost based on all the transactions on the county, but 2 years in arrears.
Yeah.
So really what you're looking at this year happened 2 years ago. So, and it didn't happen exactly because of the community programs at that time. It has to do with the total costs at that time
Okay.
Yeah.
and how they were spread now, from 2 years ago.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sorry for that.
No, that's okay.
It's,
That's okay. I appreciate you
It's going to take,
explaining it.
you know what, you almost can't wrap your head around it, because I've had many conversations with the auditor's department, and I think with us not actually being working in the cost plan and understanding it, it's difficult, because there's a lot of elements. I mean, technology has to provide all of their time, every minute of their time. There's also, there's many other factors even beyond just the time. There's a lot to it, and it takes into account everything.
No, thank you. Supervisor Curro?
Well, Joe Paul, you hit where I was gonna go, and that is on these general service departments, it's their actual cost from 2 years ago that's spread out across all of the transactions and departments. And so I really just wanted to make that really clear. This is not an arbitrary number that just comes out of the woodwork. I always question it every year on my budget, going, how exactly? And then Joe Paul would sit down with me and explain to me, okay, it's 2 years in the rear. And so it really is something that is audited in detail in that single audit. And I get why we do it now, but as a department, it was something that was a little hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah. And there are other counties that use another form. Again, maybe for the federal programs is a little different, but, you know, there's ISFs, internal service funds, direct billing. There's different ways to account cost, but this is the way we've been doing it for years.
And
the
about
cost plan 87.
half the cost of the general services departments this year, 2 years from now, they'll be borne by really the subvented funds. The other half, we do the calculation, it's really a general fund cost. But as I mentioned, we don't really charge it out because it's, you know, moving from the right pocket to the left.
Madam Chair, if I may follow? But just to acknowledge, though, that this is an auditing mechanism, and it's, you know, what is the exact number of cost plan on this? I didn't see it right. You said 30-something thousand?
Well,
Sir.
it's from 87,418 was the amount that we're giving to the community
Right.
programs, but the cost is $118,919.
Oh, okay, so 32,000 extra. So my point that I'm trying to make, though, is that just for the public's perspective, it's not costing $32,000 to write these checks. So I just want to make it clear that we're not putting, you know, in my head at least, maybe because I'm not an auditor, we're not putting $119,000 towards senior services. We're, you know, it's significantly less than that. That's just, from a practical standpoint, is kind of the way I'm trying to look at it, because there's just no way it costs your office $32,000 to distribute checks.
It's not necessarily just all about the work either. It's about equipment. It's about, there's so much more lights. There's other things involved outside of just someone going in there and cutting the check. So it takes into account everything. And when I was in IT, that's where it got very complicated, because we had to include everything, all the inventory. That includes everything that we have. So yes, I think in some cases, you know, I get your point, but, you know, in many conversations, years of conversations with the auditor, it takes into account everything, and there's an overall cost associated with it.
Right, but if we didn't do the senior services, we wouldn't go down by $119,000 in our budget. That's all. I guess that's from a practical standpoint, that's my.
You're absolutely correct.
So
You're
that's all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Billable hours, you can look at it as billable hours.
Years ago, we did not present the cost plan charges for general funds departments or general fund contributions. You know, we didn't do it. But in some ways, it's a misrepresentation. So, you know, it really doesn't show the cost of government.
Well, if you look at this room, look at all the department heads, those are billable hours that they're here present, sitting in the meeting with us. You know, it is what it is. They're not being paid to sit here literally, but they are. And so billable hours is a simplified method to think of it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe Paul.
Any other comments or questions from the board? No. Would someone like to make a motion to approve this item for temporary due pass?
So move.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? 5-0. Thank you. Okay, now moving on to county council.
So this item was added to show that general expenses for county council, it looks like they stayed the same overall. However, if we focus on the salary and benefits, if we look at the 22-23 CAO recommended. That's the third column with numbers. If we go down to where it's salary and benefits, that's about 1.4 million. That was adopted a year ago. And so the department request was also about 1.4. It kind of stayed in line with, the recommended budget from a year ago. And you can see that for salaries and benefits, the CAO recommended budget actually moved. It decreased by about almost $400,000. And what we did here is we moved it from salaries and benefits to services and supplies to account for anticipated outside legal counsel, which I believe has been something that the board has discussed in previous meetings. And another thing we can look at is the overall. So for 22-23 CAO recommended adopted budget from a year ago, overall, the last row, revenues less expenses, you can see that the net cost to the general fund, at least for the budget side, was 1.2 million. And so that CAO recommended on the far right-hand side does show, instead of having a 1.2 million net cost to the general fund, it's a net cost of 1 million. So there was a decrease of $200,000, and part of it could be from revenues. I do see that the revenues row at the very top. If you compare the CAO recommended from a year ago to the CAO recommended for 23-24, it went from 1 million in revenues to almost 1.2 million in revenues. And again, that county council is one of the departments that receives a cost plan allocation. So when all departments are charged, we just talked about the community programs. So the amount, the 30,000 that's charged to the community programs, part of that 30,000 is going to county council as revenue. Now, is there anything else?
No, I would just add, they also do direct billing as well. So I know that they direct bill services to our social services department, health and human services, behavioral health. So there's also an element of that built into the revenue section too. So that's what you see. And there's been a lot of work that's been done in that office. So with that, we just wanted to highlight the change that was made from years prior and moving the funds to a different fund area, services and supplies. So that's what we wanted to share with your board, and we'll pass it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment?
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please provide a speaker card, and on Zoom, please press *9 or the raised hand icon. And I have no public comment.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the board?
Madam Chair, I know we're going to get into the potential legal contract later. I just want to put it out there that, well, first of all, what's the net, because we're talking about cost plan and moving money in different departments, what's the net increase to the department or decrease moving forward if just going down the road of, and we can always approve the budget item and come back, so I understand it's not set in stone. I just would like to know for transparency's sake.
For moving to outside counsel, it's approximately $60,000 per year. It's moving from 2 FTEs, which are 173 hours, minus, of course, all the vacation and holidays and such, to 250 hours per month for those 2 employees.
So $60,000 additional for the
Yes.
department, basically putting aside all the cost
Yes.
plan and other
Yes.
Which could
factors.
be absorbed within the service and supply section, depending on the year and depending on circumstances, yeah.
Okay, but we'll have a discussion later about the
Yes.
future of county counsel's office and how that
Absolutely.
might look and map that out
Absolutely.
later. So
And again, just keep in mind, with all of these budget units, just want to make really clear that you're authorizing spending authority for that office. There's, sometimes we come back, there needs to be a contract. There'll need to be certain specific things that come up that your board will have to pass at times, depending on what it is. Even the one we'll hear in a little bit, 161, there's $150,000 allocation. Your board can authorize that money, but say, hey, look, we want to come back with where that money's going to go later. So what you're doing is you're authorizing the spending allocation. So this is what you have here is kind of a spending plan, and what we're doing is trying to anticipate, what the new year is going to be and what it looks like. I mean, that's kind of what, Ramon and the auditor, along with Tom, I don't know if Tom's on vacation, I forgot, Tom, and we work with those offices to create kind of a best plan for the year. And we look at state legislation, the state budget, and many other facets. So we do our best to kind of look at the future based on kind of the past. And this is a spending plan that we have, and we know that there's been some work done to possibly change the way the office operates. So we're anticipating that in this plan. So that's all we have. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, so would someone like to make a motion to approve temporary due pass?
I'll make a motion, temporary due pass on county council.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? 5-0. Okay, county library.
The county library also brought to the board today to show some of the changes. And we do, I believe we have the interim librarian here in case there's questions on this one. So let's look at the middle column, the 22-23 CAO recommended budget. It does show 1.9 million in total expenses, kind of right down the middle. And for 23-24, it went up a little bit. Now, this is based on some of the things we reviewed. I know the interim librarian has been looking at all the programs at the library and working on making some changes that will help the library reduce costs, essentially. One thing that the CAO's office did is we did look at limited term positions, and since I noticed that the library had, I believe, 1.5 limited term positions that were vacant, I did discuss this with our CAO, and we did freeze that 1.5 LTEs. So that's probably what you see for the salaries and benefits. Now the positions, you probably don't see a big change, but the salary and benefit from a prior year to the next year's recommended budget, it does show a decrease of a little over $100,000, and that's because, again, these are limited term positions, and I believe it was maybe a library technician or something like that. So we try to help, every little bit helps, and I believe the interim librarian is still looking at it actively on ways to make adjustments to reduce costs for this specific budget unit.
I want to add one more thing to the board. It's been great to have Manny with us. He's really been scrutinizing the programs and some of the costs. There have been some, as an example, the grant, and there's a huge burden on the county to cover the cost of even passing out all the Chromebooks, but there was no cost allocated in the grant. So he's really doing a great job looking and scrutinizing everything, and to make sure that if we do go after grants, to make sure that we have some funding available for staffing so we could reduce the general fund section. And I think that's really key and vital. So I want to thank him and his work on that. That he's also looking at other programs to make sure that it is cost effective. Passports and other programs that they have there. He's looking at everything right now. So again, this is what we have for the budget, but we're looking at reducing or streamlining some of those costs. So they may not expend as much as it's on this budget for this next year. Just wanted to share that with the board. I thought it was important, and that's why we have it on the agenda. So we'll pass it back to you, Supervisor Sotelo. Chair.
Thank you. Any public comment on this item?
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please provide a speaker card, and on Zoom, please press star 9 or the raised hand icon. And I have no public comment.
Thank you. Bringing it back to the board. Any comments or questions?
I do have a question. So is the passport program continuing at the library?
Right now, all hands are on deck with Chromebooks. I don't think, we'll invite Manny up, if you don't mind. I know he's been looking at, eliminating the program potentially because of the cost, but I'll let Manny discuss that. We've also discussed maybe putting it in another department potentially as well. So,
Madam Chair, board members, thank you very much for the opportunity. I am looking at the passports, because in looking at the way they were charging for passports, it didn't seem like they were, I guess, collecting the right amount of revenues in order to cover all the costs, because one of the things that they didn't include was postage, so that was not part of the fee that they were charging for passports. Additionally, as Ray said, it does require an additional, there's more responsibility, I think, to the library for passport processing. And I don't think that, given the programs that the library offers, I don't think it really works well with what they, it's a service that is very much needed, but the post office offers it, and they offer it for the same, almost the same price as the library. So looking at it, it is a nice benefit to have to the community, but when you look at it as a cost benefit, I don't think we're collecting appropriately the number that we need to in order to make it because the way it was couched, my understanding, again, this is all looking at, a lot of information, that it was going to raise probably about $40,000 in revenue. I can't see it, how they were coming up with that much money, given what the staffing that they were requiring to process those passports. So again, as Joe Paul was saying earlier about the cost allocation and making sure we recoup all the costs, I couldn't see it. So I did put a pause on it because, again, as the CEO said, all hands on deck with the Chromebook distribution, that were not also, there was no cost at all for the distribution for staffing. And right now, when there is a Chromebook distribution, there's about 4 staff members that are dedicated for that time frame to make sure that we document the distribution of them, so that when we do get audited, we have the proper documentation. So again, I am looking at everything. The other thing that I mentioned to the CAO that I've been tracking since I started was the hours of operation. We are open from 1 to 6 every Saturday. So I had staff look at how many people are we actually, how many patrons are coming through those doors. So it's not very significant. So that's one of the other things that we'll, as we move forward, and once we bring in the librarian, I will stay on and work with him and her in looking at all these things that operationally we need to look at. The other thing that, as the CAO mentioned, a lot of the expenses that are reflected in this budget are reflected because of COVID. Because of COVID and the library being shut down, there was a huge emphasis on pushing out information and access to documents, books, etc., that are much higher. So I'm looking at all those costs now and trying to rein them in, so that because the library is open, people can come to the library and have more access to that. So I hope that answers. I could be happy to answer any more questions.
And how about the kiosk out there off Hospital Road? Is that still going forward?
The kiosk, an update on that. My understanding in talking to Steve and his staff is we're looking at having it up and operational, hopefully, if everything goes well, by the end of July. So,
Yeah, I drove by there this weekend, and it's still the same.
yeah, there was an issue with trying to get somebody to pour the concrete for the slab. So I think that's been resolved, so we're moving forward. Hopefully by the end of July, we'll have it up and operational.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Curl?
I'm just gonna agree with Supervisor Gonzalez. This is a really important service for the community. It used to be under the clerk recorder's office, and unfortunately, that meant that the staff of the clerk recorder's office could not handle vital records because they were handling passport applications. It was not the right fit of the department. When it moved over to the library, we got a lot more positive feedback about the library than the post office. Post office is very difficult to schedule the appointments. It is not as easy as it seems. I will say it is a labor-intensive process, doing the application process. So for passports, I know you got to pause on it. I would recommend that we look at finding a way to having that service and funding it through the actual charge of the process, kind of like the cost plan thing. We're going to charge for what it costs us to do it, not make money on it. But I do feel we need another source in this community, especially with it growing. So I totally understand the pause right now, but I just wanted to kind of advocate for that service in the community.
Thank you, Supervisor Curl. Thank you very much for that.
If I could add, I agree to some extent to that, but part of, I think, identifying the actual cost for that service is something, because on the back end, there's supervisory, they need to verify all the information. If there's an error, it comes back. So there's a lot of more costs associated with that program that have not been reflected. So, and I think the other thing that they did is they offered it for so many days. I think cutting back on the number of days might be an option too, to start to see what again, there's a lot of information that needs to be looked at and considered if you want to move forward with it.
I totally agree, and I think keeping an open mind of it might not be the library. It's just where could it fit?
Madam Chair, I respectfully disagree. If it's being offered at the post office, maybe it's just I don't have the experience in county government, but just from a layperson's perspective, I don't understand why the county would duplicate that service, especially if you're telling me it's going to be potentially significantly higher cost at the county once we actually figure out the actual cost. Because what I heard is that right now we have competitive rates with the post office. So once we actually go through the process of figuring out what our rate should be, it seems to me if we're 30% higher, if we're talking about a cost plan or whatever the number is, it's a market. So first of all, we're using a lot of resources on something that's already being provided. But then secondly, I just have doubts that people are going to use the county service once they realize that it's a lot more expensive than just going to the post office. Just my thoughts on the passport, just to chime in there. And then on the rest of it, I'm just curious on why services and supplies have gone up in the recommendation by 130. Is that the cost planning we're talking about now here again, or?
Actually, hold on. I thought it was, but so other charges is where the cost plan is at. And if you compare the CAO recommended from a year ago, the other charges line toward the bottom was at 172, and when it did go up to 273, and that is the cost plan. And I have a note here that cost plan increased by $98,000. So a big portion of it was due to the cost plan. And
Why the service and supply is so significant? That's a big jump. And I've harped on this in the past, and I can't go into certain things right now, but I'm just curious as to why that's.
One of the areas that I'm taking a very deep dive into is in this area, because again, when COVID hit, there were a lot of services that the library that buys to offer to patrons. And one of the things that I'm looking at is what is the use for some of these services that we're providing? Because in some cases, the use and what we're paying are not consistent. So I'm looking at, so this number does reflect what we're currently contracted almost for. So I'm looking at eliminating some contracts that aren't necessarily a big benefit to the community. Again, it's all, it's a moving target right now, and I'm hoping that by the time October rolls around, that there'll be a big reduction in this area, because there's some contracted services that may or may not be necessary.
And just to follow up on that, are those contracts that maybe weren't close to the end of them, or you're having to go through some mechanisms to I'm just curious, because we're doing the budget now, so you know, my natural side tells me to hold off on $40,000, 30% increase in service and supplies, especially considering our service and supplies budget has been going up pretty significantly over the years. So I'm just,
Madam Chair, Supervisor Kozmicki, part of the dilemma is that not all of them are July 1st through June 30th. Some of them started in December, some of them started in March. There's no consistency. That's the other thing that I found pretty interesting.
but there's no way of finding a round number, I guess, is what you're saying.
Not at this time. I wish I could give you
I
a.
can put my faith into you and understand that we are gonna be reducing that number fairly significantly despite a potential approval here.
If we're able to eliminate some contracts, and yes, I'm hoping that it's a significant amount, again, because some of them were contracted because of COVID. Now, that's part of the reason that we're looking at some of these charges, to see if now that the library is open, we just make them available at the library. A
Can
lot
you-
of this type was made because people couldn't come to the library, so they were made through the internet access portals.
And can we have a commitment to come back before the end of the year to update us on service and supplies contract, just to follow up on essentially the work that you're doing?
Yes.
And I think we can come back too with a program plan also with the library to look at passports and other programs that are being offered there, just to share that with your board.
Thank you.
Well, if I may, just the comment on the programming, I think you guys are doing a great job. I follow the library on social media, and I love your trivia night, your game night, your music night. I love the way you are inviting the public out to come in. Summer is now with us here now, so we have kids that are home with nothing to do, and I appreciate all that you're doing. And so as soon as I see something posted from the library, I share it far and wide, because I want you to be able to, the public to be able to come in and take advantage of the programming. So when you do come back to us, hopefully maybe in the first quarter, you can go ahead and let us know the participation rate too for some of those programmings. And so thank you for sharing that.
Yes, Madam Chair, Supervisor Gonzalez, thank you very much. And I actually would like to give a shout out to the staff, because they've been in transition since I got there. And we've had this big burden of the Chromebook distribution, and they've really handled it pretty well. I think we're over 6,000 now, so, you know, we're not on, I wouldn't say we're on the home stretch, but we're making good progress for a program that, you know, will be a big benefit to this community. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Manny.
I want to second Supervisor Kozmicki on coming back at the end of the year, because in looking at services and supplies, I mean, we went from 50,000 in magazines and subscriptions to 100,000. That just seems ridiculous. Sorry, I'm just going to say it. $100,000 on magazines and subscriptions is a lot of money that could be going towards something else more substantial for the county.
Thank you. Okay, so do we have a motion to approve temporary due pass for the county library?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? 5-0. Thank you. Now moving on to the sheriff.
So the sheriff's operations was kept on regular agenda because I know the sheriff's been very proactive about finding revenue. I believe not too long ago, maybe a couple of weeks ago, he brought an item to the board regarding, I believe it was a $3 million grant. And so we just wanted to showcase that. I don't think the sheriff's in the audience today, but so you can see that on the revenue side, that first row, it went up to $2 million for their revenues. And on their expenses, they did go up from a year ago, from 8.3 million to 8.7 million. However, that bottom line is still at that 6.6 million in budgeted, as far as just the budgeted costs. Again, that net cost to the general fund, in this case, it stays about the same. That was it for.
Yeah, that's all we have.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this item?
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please please provide a speaker card, and on Zoom, please press *9 or the raised hand icon. I have no public comment.
Thank you. Bring it back to the board. Supervisor Zanger?
Yeah, I just real quickly, CEO, is the sheriff, is he out of town right now? Is he around if we needed him in this?
I can't,
Out of town.
I think he's out of town.
think he's out of
Okay.
town, but
Okay, that's just good to know for
Yeah.
the rest of this, though. That's all. Just checking.
Any other comments or questions from the board? No? Okay, and I do see Kelly Kennedy is here from the sheriff's office, so if there was any questions, I'm sure she might be able to help us. Okay, so does someone want to make a motion to approve temporary due pass for the sheriff?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? 5-0. Okay, RMA and planning.
This is a unique budget unit. It's called the Economic Development Division, and it is technically it's under RMA/planning. However, we kept this on regular because this division is holding the historical funds that were allocated to other nonprofits and at least one district, I believe. So again, because this was a topic of conversation in previous months, we wanted to keep it up for discussion. And let's see. So the recommended budget is pretty much status quo. It was 152,000 a year ago, and it's 152,000 this year as well. And that 152 is made up of the $150,000 allocated to the various organizations you see on the screen.
That's all we have, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any public comment on this item?
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please provide a speaker card, and on Zoom, please press *9 or the raised hand icon. In chambers, we have Aaron Johnston.
Good morning, Board, Madam Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to talk today. For people who don't know me, my name is Aaron Johnston. I'm with Granite Rock Company. It's my day job. Granite Rock is a 123-year-old family-owned company in San Benito County. Where the bulk of our flagship quarry is. We have about 1,000 employees, so it's about 1,000 families, and they live, work, and play here. So that's why we really care about economic growth in this county. We want to see a path forward. And revenue is what we need to talk about here today a little bit. And I want to just apply a little bit of history of economic development from the perspective of the Economic Development Corporation of San Benito County, which is the last number that you saw on your screen there. RMA used to fund economic development in California. So the state would come down and give economic development agencies money. That went away. And so it had to switch to private funding or funding from public government. 5 years ago, the EDC entered into a 5-year MOU with the county. We're in the 5th year now. And that got matching funds from the city of Hollister. Economic development is a team sport. So you have to have the cities, including San Juan Bautista, who enjoys services from the Economic Development Corporation, and you have to have the county. And sometimes you have to get them all on the same page. And you're going to hear a little bit about a comprehensive economic development strategy that the EDC is bringing forward with help from grants that the EDC received. So the value you're getting right now is pretty high, I must say. I would like to tell you that the EDC is a nonprofit. As the type of nonprofit charter we are, we cannot do political advocacy. I want to make that clear. We can only do education. The other thing that's interesting about the EDC is we have no full-time employees. We have a very active volunteer board. I know because I've been chairman for 5-6 years or so now. and some wonderful local businesses that are represented on that board. So you get a tremendous amount of value for very little money there. You're going to hear from other speakers about the SEDS that I talked about, so I won't belabor that. But what that does is it unlocks the door for this county to help us solve our problems without raising local taxes and without spending out of the general fund. We're going to go for grants, and there's bigger grants for SEDS now than there has been before. We're not just talking millions now, there's billions. In the SEDS also talks about metrics of our problems and our successes. We're doing pretty good, actually, compared to our neighbors, but we have some big issues to solve if we want to bring in business. And I will stop there.
Next in chambers, we have Amy Paris.
Good afternoon, Board of Supervisors. My name is Amy Paris, and I'm the coordinator for the Economic Development Corporation of San Benito County. Hopefully by now you have received multiple letters of support for the EDC. These letters are from community leaders, local business owners and developers, the Office of the Governor, and others who will directly be affected should the EDC be defunded. As you know, the EDC applied for and received an EDA grant to implement the San Benito County Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. This was done for San Benito County, Hollister, and San Juan Bautista. We did not procure this funding for the EDC, but for you. Without funding, the EDC will be forced to pull this grant that will then be deemed incomplete, according to the EDA. Once that happens, the EDA has told us very clearly that, and I quote, "It will place a black mark upon San Benito County and the community, and future funding will most likely not be available, especially with the EDA," end quote. Defunding us would be detrimental to San Benito County, given the vital initiatives in jeopardy of losing out on billions of dollars of EDA money. The county will soon find that its initiatives, including but not limited to improving broadband, wastewater, and roads, retaining hospital facilities, and finding alternative sources of electricity, will then be funded on the backs of its taxpayers. By not funding the EDC, you're not saying no to us, you're saying no to them. Regarding our current MOU, I know that you've been asking for metrics. Our new software to measure those metrics, including tracking emails, meetings, and phone calls with both new and existing businesses, is in place, and we are fully prepared to deliver those numbers to you in future quarterly reports. For now, I hope that you can look to the SEDS to find the most up-to-date metrics. We know that there are no shortcuts here. Economic development is a slow process. It could take up to 18 months for a grant to come to fruition, and in that time, it's much easier to see a daily newsletter in your inbox or to attend a weekly downtown event, but a lot harder to see the behind-the-scenes effort being made to fill an empty building or develop a parcel of land. This is where trust and consistency must come into consideration. The founder of LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman, once said, "Trust equals consistency over time. Trust equals consistency over time." Today, I implore you to trust that Renee and I, along with our 10-member volunteer board of highly regarded business leaders and developers, remain 100% committed to our purpose of providing a roadmap for economic development in San Benito County, and will continue to remain steadfast in our consistency to fulfill that purpose for you, our community, and for those who come after us. Should we continue our partnership with San Benito County, I know that there is no limit to what we can achieve together. Thank you.
In chambers, we also have Renee Wells.
Good morning. My name's Renee Wells, and I'm the Executive Director of the Economic Development Corporation of San Benito County. I have been with the EDC for 2 years. I do not have a background in economic development, but I have lived in San Benito County for 23 plus years, and after retiring from 26 years as a grants and contracts manager for a large Bay Area health foundation, I wanted to help revitalize, grow, and give back to my community, and I was asked to take this role. Leading the EDC, I was able to apply for and receive an EDA grant to facilitate an update of the county's 5-year Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, or the SEDS. The SIDS is crucial to the county and is a partnership between the county and the cities of Hollister and San Juan Bautista. It contributes to an effective planning process that engages stakeholders and the community in important discussions about what best serves economic development in San Benito County, and it develops a roadmap for collaboration that builds on the strengths and the weaknesses of the county. Every county must maintain a current SIDS in order to apply for it or obtain an EDA grant. There needs to be an organization like the EDC to not only implement the SIDS, but spearhead the strategic plan and important initiatives that lie within it over the next 5 years. This Friday, the EDC will host a public forum to provide an overview of the SIDS and give the public a 30-day period to review and provide feedback before the SIDS is brought forward to the EDA for approval and hopefully to the Board of Supervisors for adoption. If the SIDS does not receive continued funding, the county's SIDS will fail and not move forward. This will be detrimental to the county and the cities of Hollister and San Juan Bautista, and will show the stakeholders that worked with us on the document, including county representation and city council, Board of Supervisors staff. Developers, manufacturers, utility companies, and business owners and organizations. You will be showing them that they and the organizations they represent are not valued for their time and effort on behalf of the county if you don't move this forward. I appreciate and respect each of you and value your time and urge you to approve funding to continue the EDC's work. Thank you.
I have a few on Zoom. First, Randy Starbuck, you've been unmuted and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I will be brief. I fully support the previous speakers on this item relative to the comprehensive economic development strategy. I just want to add one aspect to this. As has been stated, the SEDS is a prerequisite for being able to apply for various forms of funding available through the United States Department of Congress and the Economic Development Administration. Not having access to that, in addition, puts San Benito County at a disadvantage in the world of economic development. Other communities that have a SEDS in place are going to be able to pursue funding that would allow them to retain companies, expand companies, and attract new companies to their communities that San Benito would not be able to do. That competitive disadvantage in today's environment is a real detriment. So I would wholeheartedly recommend and encourage the board to continue funding the Economic Development Corporation, support the SEDS, and push for the implementation of the SEDS once it's adopted, so you can maintain a competitive position going forward in terms of economic development. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. Next, we have Steve Wallstrom. You've been unmuted and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you and good morning. I want to just add, well, first of all, Marie Jones and myself had the privilege of working this past year with the EDC on this SEDS, and you all have an opportunity to take a look at that. Hopefully you have. That said, I think there's 2 points I want to make. One is the EDC is uniquely, the economy is changing rapidly before our eyes. And the EDC is uniquely positioned to help guide San Benito County through that change going forward, irrespective of federal or state grant money that's out there. But in addition, as everyone has said, in the past, the federal state money for grants and economic development have been rather small. That is no longer the case. There is significant money out there for the county to obtain with broadband infrastructure and other similar improvements. So it's pretty important from my perspective that the county continue funding the EDC. Thank you.
You're welcome. And we have one other. Marie Jones, you've been unmuted and you now have 3 minutes. Ma'am, you can unmute yourself. There you go.
Sorry about that. I think I unmuted the same time you were unmuting and somehow I got confused. I think everybody who's spoken on this topic has already done a great job. I do note that you have it already in your budget, so it looks like you're not anticipating cutting this, and I would encourage you to fund this organization to continue the work of economic development for San Benito County and to continue to allow your various nonprofits and developers and cities and counties to apply for federal funding to do the work that's important to your community. Thank you.
Thank you as well. I have no further public comment.
Thank you. Bring it back to the board. Does the board have any comments or questions on this item?
I would like to see that we fund this in the amount that's originally on the budget. A lot has been said about that, and we as supervisors have received numerous letters of support, and most recently from Ms. Walton, Mrs. Baines, and Mrs. Boyd, and so I appreciate those. I agree with the speakers. It's essential. I do not want to place the county of San Benito in a disadvantage, and if we do not fund this, we're going to be doing just that. And it's my understanding, too, that the tax on the mining specifically set up the EDC for it to be funded, and so we would be cutting off our nose to spite our face if we defunded this, because that's the reasoning that this funding is in the budget in the first place. And so I wholeheartedly want to make sure that we fund the San Benito County Economic Development Corporation. Where I disagree with what is on this agenda here, or this listing of organizations, I would like to see the county fund the San Benito Business Council as opposed to the Monterey County Business Council. Just recently in the news, the city of Salinas and the county of Monterey elected to not participate in their Chamber of Commerce. And so it's within each entity's right to put the funding where they believe it's so fit, and I think it's more appropriate to fund San Benito Business Council as opposed to the Monterey County Business Council. Keep the money local. Thank you.
Supervisor Kozmicki?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I have a few questions. The part about the SEDS and that process that's going on, what impact, if the county did defund the EDC, would that have on the SEDS? Do we have a firm grasp on that? And I'm just concerned that the SEDS is every 5 years. And a secondary question will be, when was the last SEDS update? If we have that, I don't know if you guys are willing to.
Yeah, we invite Aaron? Aaron's been working on the SEDS, their team, so we'll invite Aaron. Yep.
Thank you, Supervisor Kaminsky. And by the way, I'd like to thank you for your comments to sustainable road funding. I forgot to get to that earlier. Of course. The current SEDS, we're in the home run stretch right now. If we were to use a baseball analogy, the bases are loaded. We're in our closing pitcher. We're down to a full count. If we walk off right now, we're not gonna make the playoffs on it. Our representative at the EDA was quite frank about that. So we're still getting reversed against that grant. We would work hard to make sure that it just doesn't go in the dumpster, but it would be a bad message on a couple fronts. One, the agency that has the voice of the community for making the SEDS would be defunded. That would not look good for the EDA, because it was this agency, the EDC, that got that grant funding to advance that. And then the agency might be skeptical of our ability to deliver on grant funding that's for the projects that are specific in the SEDS going forward to the next 5 years. So it's not just get into the playoffs and you're done. We have to get into the playoffs, keep that living document alive, administer that document, and go for those funding grants in there. The last SEDS was 5 years ago, to answer your prior question.
So, but would the EDC, you're telling me this EDC would just go away, I guess? Is that because if the organization is still there, if there was just less funding, I mean, we've had it in the past where the county didn't fund the EDC and the EDC still existed.
Yep.
Why would that preclude the EDC from at least having some level of oversight of a SEDS document?
It's a very good question. So we're all volunteer board, so our staff, our time is difficult to allocate for this, even though how important it is. The 2 part-time employees on staff are funded almost entirely by the county, matching funds by the city, some funds from San Juan Bautista, some funds from PG&E, and in past funds from Granite Rock Company. But the bulk of the funding comes from the $100,000 from the county that is matched by the city. Now, there's been some disruptions in that in the past, and we have the city's support now, and I think you've heard good things from the mayor about our efforts there. But that's why it's really a team sport, is because all players need to put in so that we get the best value there. Did I answer your question, sir?
Yeah, well, the SEDS is a 5-year document, so correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like, you know, I feel like, and this isn't, don't take this negatively, it almost feels like an ultimatum, you know, that if you don't fund the EDC, we're never going to have a SEDS, because we have these 5-year arrangements with the EDC that seem to go in line with that timeline.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm concerned, is if it's coming to us right at the budget time, and I'm, you know, and I think there are, I think, valid questions about what we're getting out of the $500,000 really. If we look at it from a 5-year perspective, $500,000, it's $1 million if you include the city of Hollister's contribution over that 5-year period. So I just haven't seen a lot of, I know we've talked in the past, we've worked on the metrics and all that. I haven't been on the economic development committee for this year, but I'm just concerned that if the SEDS is all we're getting out of it, then, you know, and I did read the SEDS. I read through it. I saw, and I may have a couple questions on that as well. Just, you know, I saw how it was laid out, and, you know, there's some initiatives in there. Some of them are already existing, you know, government projects and things like that. But so are you saying that we can't cut the funding off anytime between now and 5 years from now? Or are you saying that right now at this particular moment we're in a critical point?
At this particular moment, we're in a critical point. I would not want to hold the county or any government agency hostage to a contract that they cannot reevaluate in a 5-year period. That's not fair to the public. This is public funds, this is public revenue, and we should always be able to review these and have accountability. So I'm not proposing that. The reason we went after 5 years funding prior, and we're at the end of the 5 years funding prior, is to a point you made early. Attraction and retention of employees is very difficult. And if you don't have a multiple year commitment of funding, attracting executive directors and staff to do the work of the agency is very, very difficult. And we've experienced this firsthand 5 years ago. Sorry for the history lessons to go today. 5 years ago, when we went for the funding, there was matching funding from the city and county. The original executive director, as an example, that we had targeted, moved on to greener pastures because there was a delay in implementation of that funding for the first year. So to having funding on a year-to-year level is very difficult to retain the talent that we think this community deserves. But that is the situation we're in right now.
Okay. And then I was under the impression that the $200,000, the 100 from us, 100 from the city, was to fund a full-time director. And now I'm hearing today that we basically have 2 part-time employees. When did that changeover occur? Because I thought the prior director may have been full-time before Renee.
The original contract for the director that left after there was a delay in funding, it was nearly a full-time position. Given the constraints of our funding that have not matched the pace of inflation, so that we're getting the same no cost of living and all that, it was necessary to divide and conquer those positions so that the community can get value out of that, if you understand.
Okay. And then more specifically with the, I don't think I have anything else. I appreciate you're willing to answer all these questions.
I appreciate you taking the time to ask them.
With the SEDS, how are the stakeholders chosen?
It was mostly volunteer. There's a long list. The original SEDS, we had just about everybody in the county on it. And so it was kind of broad in scope. This SEDS need to be very specific in scope because we're going after targeted projects. So we reached out to the county staff city staff to look for specific projects, elected officials, both county, city, San Juan Bautista, and industry leaders, and as well as other nonprofits that are interested in economic development. The list of participants is, I can't rattle it off right now for you, but I think it's about 3 dozen, and that's included in the SEDS packet, so it's available for you. I've been corrected, sir, 47.
Okay, and I think that's it for questions on the SEDS and the EC from you. I appreciate that.
I appreciate
Thank
the
you.
time, and I'm available for more if there are.
Okay, great. And then, just beyond that,
Supervisor Kuzmicki, can we get the slide back up before you continue, just
Sure
so
thing,
I can follow along?
yeah.
Yeah, remote, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I'd like to hear from my colleagues, I guess, on this, but my main concern, obviously, is that we have some tangible benefit from the EDC. I know there's been input from the community. It seems like a lot of the people that have worked on the SEDS, and I appreciate all their work on it. I appreciate everybody that's dedicated to economic development. I am a believer in economic development. I just want to see results, at some point, and that's my main concern, and I don't necessarily know whether the SEDS is going to be the bearer of that. I did, like I said, I did read the SEDS. There's some good ideas in there, and certainly I know it's the comment period now, so I certainly will take some time and comment on that when I can. But there's some good things in there. There's some other things that I disagree with. For one, that one of the main drivers of economic development here in the next 5 years is going to be that we should push for more market rate housing. That's something that I don't necessarily agree with, because we have a lot of housing projects already in line that are coming, and so that's one area in particular. And then I noticed there was one of the main initiatives within the SEDS was to essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, to essentially create a taxing district to help fund PG&E upgrades that, again, correct me if I'm wrong, that PG&E should be funding. And I know that's a roadblock to commercial development, to all sorts of development, but I just think those are things that that I don't necessarily know I agree with. And then some other things in there are just, projects that are already underway. The San Juan Bautista water project, wastewater project. I guess I do see the potential benefit of the grant funding aspect of that with some of those projects. I wouldn't want to necessarily throw that opportunity away, but I am more interested in just knowing, if we don't fund the EDC, is it necessarily going to mean that some of these opportunities within the SEDS just go away? And I don't necessarily have a firm answer on that, because that would be something that would need to be hashed out going forward, whether it's the county maybe temporarily funding some assistance or providing some assistance until we get to the point where the SEDS is done. I just don't feel comfortable with the idea of signing up for 5 years. The SEDS is 5 years, so in theory, you could argue that the EDC's primary role is to implement the SEDS, and we may or may not get anything out of that. And to this point, I just have not seen results, and this has been sort of a broken record for a while now, and at some point, if we don't see results, we have to move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Any Supervisor Curl?
Okay, so Erin, you might have to come up because I have a couple questions. First of all, anticipated cost, the cost of the SEDS itself in developing the SEDS, what's the cost of doing all of this work to get to the SEDS being finalized? Do you have a rough estimate?
Yeah, I believe the EDA grant was $80,000. You had to show 20% in-kind participation. Those have been, lots and lots of hours of staff time. I think it's a couple hundred hours at this point, which is the need to have the staff there.
And then out of having a completed SEDS in our community, what are we anticipating in grant funding that we might be able to bring in for economic development specifically?
Well, it's specific in there, but some major impediments to growth is energy availability. So we would be going after grants to solve that. And how we get there is a reasonable question. The energy provider arguably should supply, but sometimes they need assistance. Getting water and sewer to places is an impediment. And also having, what I haven't talked about, because we've talked about the SEDS, is the conversation between government and businesses that are trying to expand. That is a large part of what the EDC does. And those conversations sometimes pay for themselves for the EDC. In your district, sir, we expanded fire clay. In those conversations, we talked them into investing and having their headquarters down in San Benito County. I believe you've seen a letter from the CEO of Fire Clay this weekend. In the fine print there, he referred to the additional hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue that's come to this county. That's an additional hundreds and thousands of dollars in tax revenue to this county. It's a private company. We can't say exactly what that was, but I would hold that as a metric that you are getting value in other ways.
And when it comes to the metrics and measurables, I'm very much a supporter of matrix and measurables. And I haven't seen as much, and I'm new here, but I haven't seen as much on that end. And I hear that you guys have the software in place, but we don't need to know where the money's coming from, but we need to know that the money is coming in, and that needs to be measured and documented, and that will help support the funding of the EDC. Right now, that's my biggest challenge, is how do we get that metric so that we can actually show the revenue is coming in. And so I support the EDC. I especially support the SEDS and getting it completed, and I don't want to throw a monkey wrench into it, but I am expecting true measurables that will be done on an ongoing basis. We don't need to know the companies, just how much is coming in. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So I have some issues with the SEDS as well. I mean, the housing aspect of it is a problem for me. But regarding the fire clay and the metrics that we keep talking about, I hear about the fire clay tile one. That's great. Was there anything else like that, or is that?
There's a couple developments at the airport that was within the city, which helped exacerbate our power consumption problems. But those were some developers there. There was also some policy work that we did on with the city that was very important to keep one of the biggest assets in this county available for businesses. We have something called the Through the Fence license at the airport. This is where it's a very unique situation for an airport. There's 2 airports in the western United States that can do this. One of them's in Scottsdale. We were working very closely with city staff and businesses to keep that alive, as well with the FAA. I don't want to speak for somebody who can't speak today, but he's a major developer that's on the EDC board. He's ill. He can't be here today, and he would be very supportive of continuing those efforts because of the investment the private investment they put towards that asset. There's some other smaller business growth things and more working with businesses to eliminate roadblocks with local government. I don't think that's appropriate to inventory in a public hearing when we're attracting businesses to us, but I'd be happy to inventory those for you.
Great, thank you. And so I know everyone's talking about the metrics that we need. Just as for maybe Supervisor Gonzalez and Kosmicki, was Supervisor Hernandez the one who started that, sort of brought that up regarding the EDC needed metrics, and when was that? How long ago did they start, I guess, did the board at one point start asking for metrics?
Well, Supervisor Hernandez had been asking for metrics for everything, and that just kind of became the trigger word. But for clarification, I believe that the EDC did send this board or at least admin the metrics all along, and we as supervisors did not receive them. So I'm going to suggest that you now direct them directly to the supervisors, so that each of us get it, because they were sent and we were not given them. So we're up here saying that you need metrics, we need proof. The proof had been delivered, we just did not receive it personally. And I don't know who it was addressed to. We can go offline for that conversation. But so the metrics had been delivered to this board. Going back to how long ago, Supervisor Kosmicki and I have been on for the last 2 years together, and that's just been kind of the key word, proof. Put the proof in the pudding, the metrics.
Right, thank you. Okay, and as far as the PG&E, the tax for helping PG&E out, what is the story there? What's the plan there with the tax there? What's the whole plan?
So that document's still in draft form, and I refer to an energy company, which you identify as PG&E. It could be working with PG&E directly. It could be working with a microgrid. It could be looking for alternative energy solutions to solve those problems there. I think those are all open conversation right now. I'm not trying to be invasive, but there's businesses that want to grow right now that can't plug in the power, and that needs to be solved.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. So I believe right now we're in the final year of the MOU with the Economic Development Corporation, right? We signed a 5-year agreement. We're going to be going into year 5. So this is just kind of us keeping up our end of the MOU that we signed, 4 years ago. I am incredibly supportive of us funding the Economic Development Corporation. I think, there's probably ways we can partner and work together better. But I think that, as we're going through this whole budget hearing, one of the things that, is we're having to be so careful about the money that we spend because we need more revenue, right? And so to me, we need to invest in this type of a nonprofit organization that can help bring more businesses to town, that can help facilitate some of these businesses that want to expand, and helping us identify maybe some of the areas that might be helpful. So I'm incredibly supportive of this. I'm also really supportive of the other organizations that are up here. One of the ones that is not up here that we haven't spoken about yet is REACH. And so I know we don't have the $75,000 that they asked for, but is there possibly a way that, we can give them the $10,750 as a starting point? I think a lot of these nonprofits are doing work that it would cost us a ton of money as the county, and it truly is a partnership, and so I would be supportive of what's up here. I agree with Supervisor Gonzalez. I would rather see us supporting the San Benito County Business Council. And I'm not sure what the membership is for the San Benito County Business Council.
It's 1,000.
It is 2,000?
1,000.
1,000.
So that'd be additional 1,000 to go to that 10,750.
So those are just my 2 cents on that. So
And Madam Chair, if I may also too, I was in reserve mode for the Resource Conservation District, and it just so happened they had a meeting last week. I attended, and I fully withdraw my concerns. 2017 was the last time that the county automatically funded them. For some reason, they were defunded, and they've been struggling. And so that 25,000 is really 2 years of funding that they're asking for in that 25. So I remove any reserve that I had previously. I think I was the only one that had concerns about it. So I wanted to make sure that that went on the record, that I have no reservations. And going back to your suggestion for San Benito Business Council, that would make 11,750 available for REACH, should we allocate it that way.
Madam Chair, can I please follow up?
yeah, sure.
You brought up the REACH part, so I didn't go into that. So, and I had a couple just quick follow-ups based on some other conversations. I've made points in the past about reach. We're picking one nonprofit to subsidize. We have 150 nonprofits. I don't understand why we don't go out for a notice of funding availability if we're going to go down this road. The Reach Parks Foundation, their purpose is to raise money for the county. And here we are subsidizing the organization. So I don't understand. I've never received numbers as far as what they've actually raised, as far as putting toward the parks and all that, but it seems like something's backward there a little bit. I know we received a letter that said we don't have a Parks and Recs department, so they're sort of in place of that. We actually do have a Parks and Rec division. We have an employee, 1 point something employee, and we also have RMA that oversees parks, so we do have a park function. So that on the reach part, on a principle standpoint, I appreciate what all the nonprofits do, but from a fairness standpoint, I just don't understand why we wouldn't invite all the nonprofits to apply for funding as opposed to just one that just happens to pay close attention to the Board of Supervisors. And then as far as the following up, just on this list, putting aside the EDC, I can't support, I've said this before, it's the same thing, I think last year, I don't support the Monterey County Business Council. I don't understand why we're even in that organization. Are we flipping that? Is that the understanding? Or so I appreciate that, but some of these others, the economic partnership, I just can't support those. I do support resource conservation because that's actually not a nonprofit. That's a pretty essential function, and they're going to be doing. We do know what they're going to be doing. They're going to be doing work for the county that's essential work, particularly when it comes to the stream beds and cleaning out the stream beds is something that I'm very, very keen on. And then other than that, I would like to have a conversation if it doesn't get approved on what we can do with as far as taking on the SEDS. I imagine this all might get approved either way, but we just haven't had that conversation about what happens to the SEDS if the EDC gets defunded, and if that does happen, then I think we'll obviously have to have a conversation about how to either take on that work or do a SEDS on our own. Thank you.
If I may add too, what exactly does Monterey Bay Economic Partnership purchase as with that membership? Because that's $5,000.
Are you asking about the Business Council one or
No,
the MBEP?
The
MBEP.
The MBEP.
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't. Can you repeat the question?
What exactly does that purchase as, the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership membership? What does that get us for the $5,000?
It's a tri-county county region body that works together, collaborates together. We've been invited to broadband initiatives.
Okay.
Supervisor Crowe spoke, I think, at the last large event for broadband.
That's good.
I've
I know
been
the
invited
broadband
to
aspect. Yeah.
speak on CAO with the tri-county CAOs for an event as well to discuss, because the region is interconnected, so there's things that have impacts on the 3 different counties. So that's what.
Okay. Thank you. You triggered my memory there. I remember all the various emails and organizations.
Can I just add? Is that okay? Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I wanted to make sure that everyone understood that the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership membership is very important. It helps us with Uplift Central Coast. It's the 7 county coalition. It also is part of the Broadband for All, which I am a big supporter of, trying to move that forward. So for $5,000, they keep us in the loop on all of the grant and potential funding that can come forward for us. It's also a great way to connect with our legislative representatives because they're all there, and that connects us, and being able to talk to the governor's office, it's been a real big plus in my opinion. I also want to just raise on the EDC the pressure of the power situation in our county. That money and funding going towards in the SEDS about power is not about funding PG&E. To me, in my opinion, it's about putting up basically an outside electrical resource group that would put pressure on PG&E, because PG&E is somewhat ignoring the fact that we need to move forward or we're going to be dead in the water with economic development in this county. They've got to bring the infrastructure here, and I've had many meetings about that. And unfortunately, right now, the way it works is if you don't have permit-ready plans, they won't even, your application is dead in the water with PG&E. So it's definitely an area of concern, and it will stop all economic development, which we need terribly to increase our tax base. I do also have a concern in the SEDS about the moderate housing. I really think we need to be looking at the housing needs of our community. So that is a comment area that I plan to attend on Friday and make comments on that. And I do totally support leaving the Monterey Bay Business Council membership and bringing it to the San Benito. I think that is just a common sense thing, unless there's some reason we're invested in that.
I may. We've been actually a part of the association and paying for it. We've been actually paying for it out of the subvention funds. So those departments have been covering it. During the Great Recession, we were looking at ways we could still be a part of the association. So we've been paying for the local San Benito County Business Council. We have been, but not in this area. Yeah, so just an FYI on that.
Do you want to speak to the Monterey Business Council membership at all, or do you? No big deal if we get rid of that one.
I don't attend it. So
Okay. I mean, I
have
just don't
time.
know if there's value. I don't know what it is. So, I mean,
I think we're all busy with local.
okay. I would rather us really focus on
Yeah.
local, although I do see the real benefit of us working kind of regionally.
the
And
regional,
so
right.
I'm really supportive of
And
that.
I think that was the reason why we're a part of that, is to understand what the region's doing from their business council perspective. But if the
Okay.
board has concerns about the finances, that's fine. We don't need to be part of it.
Supervisor Zenger, did you have? any
Yeah, I had
comments?
some comments just generally because I only touched on EDC before. So as far as MBEP, I actually disagree. I attended the big broadband workshop seminar we went to. I did not think it was a great use of time or resources personally. So I don't really see a lot of value out of that, being part of that group. I don't see a reason to be part of the Monterey Business Council. And I'm not really interested in funding REACH either. RCD, I also went to a meeting once and I saw the value in there, and I know they're very active as far as acquiring grant funding too, so that's really good. So I think that's basically all of them I touched on, so that's all just my comments.
Can
Thank
we
you.
go back to the REACH conversation then, because there's different opinions on that?
Go ahead.
Well, if we go ahead and not pay the funding for the Monterey Business Council, there's 2,000. If we put it toward the San Benito, there's 1,000. So that would leave 11,750. I disagree with Supervisor Kozmicki and Zanger in that it's not just that Valerie Eglin is always coming and talking to us here at the Board of Supervisors. If you really look and see what they're doing, they are advertising the parks. And even though we have a 1.5 FTE, they are not out marketing the parks. They're doing the what they need to within their job description. But the Parks and Rec Commission that we have, there is a commission. They don't meet frequently, and people who attend the meeting, there's not much happening. And REACH can do so much more as a nonprofit. And so I personally would like to see the remainder that's left of the funds, the 1175, to go toward REACH. It's not the 75 that they wanted, but it's a portion, and it's what's left in this budget. So I would like to have a call of the vote to see about putting REACH in there, because it was initially in here and then it was removed.
I'm just wondering, Supervisor Gonzalez, would you be okay with, I know sometimes, they asked for 75,000. I don't know, if we gave them 11,750, I don't know that, they may say there's nothing we can do with that. So I almost would, if it's okay with this board, I guess what I would like to see us do is just go ahead and approve the 150,000 with the temporary due pass. And then we can go back at a later date and maybe, and in between that time, have conversations, whatever, and figure things out. But at least for the moment, we can hold this $150,000. Now, I do have one question on it, though. How come with this group, we don't have the cost plan is very, very minimal compared to the previous one? Previously, it was like 30%. This one is only $2,300 for a lot more money. So why the difference in the cost plan on that?
That's a great question. I'd have to look at the details to pinpoint whether or not this specific budget unit was allocated the cost plan. And it's possible that because it's 2 years in arrears, that this budget unit just happened to not have as much allocated to it. Part of it, again, is because the cost plan is looking at total costs in a budget unit, and if this budget unit is historically, 150,000 has been the expenses for this budget unit, then it's probably just very little that is allocated to this budget unit when compared to all other budget units which have costs in the millions.
Got ya. Okay.
And we can come back and dive into that.
Okay.
And have an explanation for that when, we can actually add that in the staff report on the adoption of the budget. We'll make that clear, and we can talk to the board later about it.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So, is everybody comfortable with us just leaving it as 150,000 right now and doing it as a temporary due pass, and then we can go back at a later time and identify
Yes.
on that other? You guys okay with that?
I would just want to make the comment that since we are already funding San Benito or membership for San Benito Business Council, that 2,000 would go into the available for the organization.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so does someone want to make a motion to approve a temporary due pass for this?
So moved.
I'll second with the edits commented.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
No.
No.
So 3-2, Supervisor Zenger and Supervisor Kosmicki voted no. Okay, so moving on now to roads.
The Road Maintenance Department is responsible to maintain and make repairs to the county's network of roads, bridges, and other related infrastructure so that the community can operate on them safely. We do have RMA Director Steve with us, and we added this budget unit here because the county has unfrozen 4 road workers, and if you compare the previously adopted budget to the 23-24 CAO recommended budget, you will see an increase for salaries and benefits, and that's in large part due to unfreezing of the 4 road crew workers. And let's see.
That's it.
That's pretty much it for this budget unit.
Yeah, we'll pass it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any public comment?
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please provide a speaker card, and on Zoom, please press *9 or the raised hand icon. I have no public comment.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the board? No? Oh, Supervisor Curl?
I know in going through all of the staff schedules for the FTEs, there are unfunded in this department. There are 2 that are unfunded for 23-24. Can you, I have questions overall about those unfunded ones. Are those just vacant positions? I just want to clarify.
Those would be vacant positions. So the reason we have them as unfunded is because the road, RMA, they look at the details, they look at how many positions they do have filled, and they look at how many are vacant. And so I think the 4 road crew workers were the only ones, I can't remember exactly how many they had total unfunded. It could have been 6 if 2 remain unfunded for this budget unit. That means a year ago they must have had 6, and so kind of between conversations with the board and part of that commitment earlier this year at the board retreat, as far as showing the board's commitment to the road crew, and kind of making sure that we're taking care of potholes and, you know, anything else, all those issues that we deal with the roads. We went forward with unfreezing the 4 road crew workers, which were probably vacant, if I'm not mistaken, for the current fiscal year.
Okay, because the reason I'm bringing it up is I didn't know if these, and maybe the CAO can help me understand this, the unfunded column on all of the salaries, staff positions, is that because of the vacancy budgeting? No?
No. So
What-
vacancy, but so we have to account. When you talk about vacancy, when we talk about vacancy budgeting, we're funding those positions to potentially be filled. And so after each, as you'll see here in the resolution, we're going to put some mechanisms in place to not basically to hold that number.
And so that's
Now-
to release, when it's not spent in that quarter, it's to release it.
Release it, or that's what you could do, but that's a lot of work. So what we're looking at doing is just freezing that and having the CAO, auditor, and the board have to authorize any moving of funds in the salary and benefits section into either services and supplies or using it somewhere else. So it'll automatically get dropped into fund balance at the end of the year. So that'll make up the $5 million that we're looking for. But we're going to be monitoring it. So those positions are funded. Now, when they're unfunded, there have been times in years past where the board said, "Hey, look, we want to keep those positions, but we're just not going to fund them." Or there's going to be a department where we don't fund those positions, but we still have the FTEs there. Then I'm going to go look for money. I'm going to go find money. If they do, then we'll come back to the board and we'll fund those positions with the board if it's going to be a grant or it's going to be some other mechanism or other funding source. So that's so there's a difference. Hopefully that clarifies that for you.
It does. Thank you so much. I just wanted to make sure that when it comes to roads, and we know roads are our major concern, whatever we need to do to put the money towards it, I want to make sure that we're funding those positions. Thank you.
So I think that's all so it's back.
Okay, if there's no other comments or questions from the board, would someone like to approve the roads fund with a temporary due pass?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? 5-0. Thank you. Okay, now let's move on to capital projects.
Capital projects. This fund holds all capital expenditures and activities regarding infrastructure, tenant improvements, and technology upgrades of county-owned property. The capital projects group provides leadership and assistance to the county departments who need facilities improvements or expansions, commencing from the initial planning and exploring various alternatives for their needs through the design and construction stages. The department interacts with the owner, customer of the project, and various other county departments as needed, and the public to promote transparency throughout the process. Best practices are employed to utilize the best available resources within and outside the county in order to deliver a completed project in a timely manner. We did include the Hall of Records refurbishment utilizing TITR funds, and with us to discuss the CIP list is Steve.
All right, good morning, Madam Chair and boards. Yes, so we have available to discuss all of the CIP items, but we did want to highlight a few and bring a few to your attention in that regard. As Ramon just mentioned, we wanted to for sure bring up all the new recommended projects that we'll be asking and utilizing for new general funds this year. The first one, the big one, hall records, essentially it's general fund, but as Ramon just mentioned, it's really funded from, they call it teeter fund account, so it's really not extracting the funds from the general. But it is a big item that we just wanted to mention, and we think it is very necessary. We just have to find a place for folks to relocate, so that's going to be the big hurdle for that one. And then we can discuss all these items as the board so chooses, but jumping down below, the Office of Education. So towards the end of this fiscal year, we're going to we'll be close to starting the construction for the library expansion, or yeah, that's correct, for library expansion, so essentially about a year from now. And so two things have to happen with that expansion. One, we have to start temporary relocating library staff, but we also permanently are going to have to relocate Office of Education staff that are currently occupying offices in the library. And so the temporary relocation obviously takes a lot less planning, and it's a matter of finding a location, and there's some options being discussed with the facilities group. But the permanent relocation for the Office of Ed, we've toured the soon-to-be vacated Child Support Services building located on San Felipe near the HHSA buildings. So there'll be a vacated, well, I'll say half of a building, and the plan is to have the Office of Ed staff relocate into that vacated half once it's vacated in the next month or so. But we have to start planning and doing some architectural plans and then the improvements, and so that cost is approximately $150,000. And then County Council and upstairs in general, this was discussed previously for having new carpet and painting, and we brought it up because it was brought up by a previous supervisor. So that cost is approximately $80,000, but I can answer questions on any of the items shown above via the public or via the board, so I'll pause there.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment?
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please provide a speaker card, and on Zoom, please press *9 or the raised hand icon. And I have no public comment.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the board?
Yeah, the county council carpet and painting. Do we ever have further dialogue on that, and what the level of necessity is on that?
No, I don't think that there's been any further dialogue. I'm not sure that it has to be done this year. It's also not just our office, it's the whole upstairs, including the auditor in the hallway. There are some points of where the carpet is like fraying and lines where it's come up, but I'll defer to RMA about where it stacks in the range of all other county improvements that need to be made, if not this year, maybe a future year.
Yeah, so if you have a chance to go upstairs, it's needed. It's not urgent. It doesn't have to occur during this fiscal year, as Barbara just mentioned, but sometime in the near future would be recommended.
That helped to expand it, the whole upstairs versus just your office. We're going through some changes to county council, so I appreciate the clarification.
Supervisor Zenger?
Yeah, thank you. So just the carpet for the sheriff's office, why is that on there, I guess? Is that urgent?
So
16,000?
The 16,000 carpet, yeah, so it's a similar request. They have an Office of Investigation that has some issues with their carpet as well, and it's it's probably in a state that's not quite as good as the one upstairs, so that was their request.
Okay, I'm in favor of removing that from the list personally. I think we joke about it, we kid about it, but really, I had word from the sheriff that he wasn't supposed to be asking for anything for 5 years. This doesn't seem necessary to me. I've been around there, I've been in there. 16,000 seems like it just seems like a silly thing to spend money on me. That's all for now. Maybe I'll come back later, but.
Supervisor Curro, did you have something?
I'm just blowing it up here so I can, because I'm sorry, that's really hard to read.
My apologies.
I'm very happy to hear that the Hall of Records is actually going to potentially move forward if this board so chooses. That is, I really, really support that. It's a long time coming. When it comes to the second floor, I don't have a problem funding it, but I really think that we need to look at what's happening with county council right now and kind of hold off on maybe earmarking that, with the fact that we're looking at about a $60,000 a year increase at county council. If we hold off on that $80,000 for the second floor, we basically wouldn't have a net county cost with this transition period that we're going through. But definitely do see the need upstairs, and I really don't have any other concerns. I know that a lot of these facilities are in pretty bad shape. I was kind of surprised there was only the garage remodel for the egg commissioner as opposed to their building. But if their garage is more important to them, just my 2 cents on that one after going to facility tours. Thanks.
I don't have anything to add, so how do we want to handle this one? Since I know you guys have some questions, do you want to take out the 80,000 to county council? No, go ahead, Supervisor Crowe.
Oh, I apologize. I did have one more thing. The $150,000 for the Office of Education, Interior Improvement. What's going on with their network? They have a completely different network system than we do. And is that staying in its existing location, or would that have to be relocated? Because if it's being relocated, that $150,000 isn't enough money.
You are correct. The 150,000 is essentially to knock down a wall, to make some upgrades so that their building's ADA compliant, to do some aesthetic improvements internally. And you're right, there's quite a large IT, fiber optic, broadband center in the library. If that gets relocated, that would have to come out of the $15 million grant, or perhaps the extra dollars from funds that are being relocated. But I don't think we've decided that yet, because that is a big infrastructure project. You're correct.
Just wanted to make sure, because coming back for that money, it's not going to be here. So, thank you.
CAO?
And I would say there's been discussions to just keep their center there and then lock it down and just we build around it, just to save some money. So again, we're not there yet. We're still looking, but that's been on the table. I just want to make sure this board's aware of that.
Thank you. Okay, so how would you like to move forward? Oh, Joe Paul?
Madam Chair and Board of Supervisors, I just wanted to bring to your attention, it was a bit of a misnomer calling it the county council renovation. It really is the second floor renovation. We're in the process of updating our office furniture and fixtures, and we wanted to be able to coordinate that move with actually painting the walls, which have never been repainted since the building was constructed, and the carpets as well. It just makes sense. If we're going to be disrupted, we might as well make the squeeze worth the juice. Or
I love that analogy.
I'm going to have to agree with that, only because I didn't know you were redoing your equipment. And if you're going to do it once, don't do it twice.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Supervisor Gonzalez?
Being on the Facilities Committee, I'm so happy to see that this Hall of Records is finally getting some attention. I've been advocating for that for 2 years, and so I'm glad. And I don't have any concerns either. I would like to support the what we have here, County Council, for $80,000, but I do appreciate that it's for the whole upper floor, the second floor of the entire building. And they are the ones that the public comes to. And again, we just want to make sure that we have it in conditions that are acceptable, no trip and fall kind of a situation, because when I know how dangerous that can be. I actually encountered stubbing myself on the carpet, and I didn't quite fall, but I know it could be an issue for someone who is, since I'm handicapped. But I would propose that we do pass on this amount for the full amount that's put on the capital projects budgets today.
Thank you. Does someone want a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
No.
4-1. Supervisor Zenger is a no. Okay, so now going back for the final budget deliberations, how do we want to handle this area? Do you want to go one by one, or do we want to just the ones that?
No, we don't need it.
I think was the conversation around authorized positions. Do you feel okay about that, or do you want to continue with that conversation?
I'm okay if we're looking at the vacancy budget, but if we have to look at the real numbers, then I have some additional concerns.
Okay.
So normally, typically, when we're at this point, I know there was one more slide on the PowerPoint that we had that we were just going to present the reserves and the plan to increase our reserves over a 3-year period. And I don't know if you want to bring that slide up. And that's our last slide. We're in our 2nd year, I believe, and we are infusing some more funds into this, but we just wanted to make sure your board was aware of that, and we're doing our best to follow the policy set forth. Obviously, this can change, and obviously with your board's direction. With that, in the final deliberations, we'll go ahead and go to the next slide here. Well, in the actual agenda under final deliberations, we've attached all the exhibits, schedule of authorized positions, schedule of fixed assets, schedule of capital improvements, schedule of road improvements, the general fund reserve policy, and the GAN limit. So those are all attached in this packet that you have before you. On page 48 and 49 of the packet, item number 7, within the resolution for the moving forward with the approval from your board on the recommended budget. There it highlights that your let me get there, that there would be so the budget transfer pursuant to Government Code sections 29125, the county administrative officer and the auditor controller jointly are authorized to approve budget transfers between objects within the program budget units in the same fund up to $50,000. Anything above 50 requires board approval. This is the key point that I wanted to make that was discussed at the audit committee. Any transfers from salaries and benefits cost line items, regardless of the amount required, will require the county administrative officer, the auditor controller, and the board of supervisors approval. So now it has to go through a full process. We have to first look at it. If there is a need, Joe Paul Gonzalez, myself will look at it, and then we will put it on the board. If there's a need for it, obviously we'll work with your board on that. But this will really, I think, put a measure in place to make sure that we are following that we are accounting for our vacancies, and that we're being able to fund that amount in the vacancy budgeting section. And there it is. It's on page 48 and 49. Under this, and item number 2, we're requesting that you move forward with a GAN limit approval for fiscal year 23-24. For those of you that may not be aware, this was established in 1979 through Prop 4. Basically, voters. It was approved by the voters for the goal of keeping local government education folks at a cap. and at the 1978, 79 levels, accounting for any adjustment in population and inflation. So when you look at this page and scroll down a little bit there should be an allocation amount that Ramon Abon actually created, and there's the dollar figures there. And thank you to the auditing team as well. There was an element there, if you scroll down a little bit more, there you go. Years past, we didn't account for the subvention departments, and that's what we have to go back and make some corrections a few years back. But for this one, we have we've included it, but we still may need to make an adjustment based on prior year's adjustments, which may have an impact on this particular number. But we will approve this, and we'll come back with an amendment on that. So again, this is something that your board can move forward with through approving the resolution on item number 1. And then item number 3 is moving forward with us, administration, myself, moving forward to present to your board an actual adopted budget that will reflect any of the changes and that has been mentioned here at this board meeting. And this will be, for administrative corrections, fixed assets, and position schedule adjustments. We'll also be asking you to move forward with staff recommendation on creating, in conjunctions with the auditor controller, to develop the adopted budget, which we'll have for you, as that's in accordance with the County Budget Act. Also, we're requesting that you authorize, there are clerical errors, as always, so if there's something that comes up, but if there's any substance or if there's anything really large, we'll make sure that it's noted in the adoption when your board does approve it. We'll probably have to discuss that further. Typically, it's just clerical errors that we can deal with, and so, and then we're requesting that you approve and adopt the general fund policy reserve that we kind of mentioned earlier, and it's attached for you. So with that, just from a discussion deliberation point of view, I just want to thank all the staff here, and it's not just these folks here. There's a lot of employees within the departments that have had a big share in creating this budget, and just want to thank everyone's time and thank your time as well. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Supervisor.
Thank you very much. Do we need to go to public comment?
Yes, let's go to public comment on this.
Okay, so is there any public comment?
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please provide a speaker card, and on Zoom, please press star 9 or the raised hand icon. And I have no public comment.
Thank you. Supervisor Curl?
One comment, I just want to make sure it's clear in that resolution, when it comes to going salaries and benefits to any other line, and it comes to the board with the auditor's approval, that's a 4/5 vote, just to make sure that everybody is aware.
Yeah.
Thank you. So do you recommend, well, is there any comments, questions from the board? Any other board? No.
Madam Chair, I just want to thank everyone that was involved with the budget. I know it's a lot of work, and in spite of some of the differences of opinion, I just know that you guys put a lot of work into it, and it's truly appreciated.
Yeah, thank you. So would you recommend that we will do item 1? And
you can
do we need to do these as temporary due pass too, or no?
No, these are actually stated for you there. You have to adopt them.
Okay, so we're going to make a motion to adopt the
To adopt
resolution
these,
setting
okay.
the GAN. Okay, so would someone like to make a motion to adopt a resolution setting the GAN limit for fiscal year 23-24?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? 5-0. So would someone like to make a motion to adopt a resolution approving the fiscal year 23-24 recommended budget as spending authority until the adoption of the fiscal year 23-24 adopted budget?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
No.
So 4-1, Supervisor Kosmicki opposes. Do we need to make a motion on all of these, County Council?
You can do them all together.
So we can do items 3, 4, 5, and 6 together. So a motion to approve items 3, 4, 5, and 6.
So moved for staff recommendation.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
3 to 2, Supervisor Zanger and Supervisor Kozmicki opposed. And that is it. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Oh, you got to conclude your hearing.
Okay, so we'll conclude the fiscal year 23-24 budget hearings. It's 11:43. Can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? 5-0. Thank you so much, everybody. Until tomorrow.
Yeah, good job on the budget, Ray. I remember the old days.
A lot of work.
No, I know.
There's a lot of changes too, and nice improvement.
Lot of
Yeah. You guys are doing great work.